History is full of heroes, but let's be honest, it's the villains that really make it interesting. Today we're diving into the dark side with a look at some of the deadliest men who ever walked the earth. These guys weren't just bad, they were bad on an epic scale, the kind that makes you glad you weren't around when they were in charge. But don't worry, we're not here to depress you. We're going to take a look at these infamous figures with a bit of humor. After all, if we can't laugh at the absurdity of their lives, we'd probably just end up crying. So buckle up as we meet 6 of history's most notorious troublemakers, served with a side of wit to make the bitter pill go down just a little easier. Genghis Khan. Our journey starts in the wild steppes of Mongolia, with a dude who knew how to throw a party, a very deadly party. Genghis Khan, born with the far less intimidating name, Temujin, was the guy who united the Mongol tribes and decided that the whole world was his backyard. And what do you do with a backyard? You take care of it, of course. Or in his case, you conquer it. Genghis didn't just conquer lands, he conquered them big time. We're talking about the largest contiguous empire in history. His motto? If it breathes, it should probably bow down to me. With an army that was basically the medieval version of a lightning-fast blitzkrieg, Genghis took over most of Asia and even parts of Europe. Now, the not-so-funny part. Genghis Khan's campaigns led to the deaths of around 40 million people. That's a lot of nope. But let's not forget, Genghis was an equal opportunity conqueror. He didn't care who you were. If you crossed his path, you'd better start running, or start digging your own grave. Funny thing, Genghis was such a ladies' man that around 1 in 200 men today are said to be his descendants. So while his methods were brutal, his family tree grew like weeds in a garden. Rumor has it, Genghis had so many children that even today, someone could bump into a distant cousin at the grocery store without even knowing it. Vlad the Impaler. Next, we fly over to Romania, where the original Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, made sure everyone knew not to mess with him, unless they wanted to end up on the wrong end of a very pointy stick. Vlad had a thing for spikes. He wasn't just content with killing his enemies, he wanted to make a statement. And what better way than impaling them on tall stakes for everyone to see? Vlad's technique was creative. He'd stick people on spikes, from the rear end up through the mouth, and then set them outside his castle. It was like a twisted Christmas tree display, only with fewer presents and more screaming. Vlad's reputation was so terrifying that even the Ottoman Empire, no stranger to brutal warfare, thought twice about invading his territory. They were probably like, yeah, let's skip that, shall we? He didn't just kill to pass the time though. Vlad was defending his homeland against invaders. But let's be real. The dude took way too much pleasure in his work. His kill count? Not as high as some, but he certainly gets points for style. And yes, he is the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So in a way, Vlad lives on every Halloween. Spooky, right? Adolf Hitler. Next on our list is a name everyone knows. Adolf Hitler. This guy tried to grow a mustache and ended up starting World War II. If that's not a bad facial hair decision, I don't know what is. Hitler's recipe for disaster included equal parts hatred, charisma, and a heaping dose of megalomania. His grand idea was to create a master race, which led to the Holocaust, the most horrific genocide in history. 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, were systematically murdered. The total death toll of World War II? Over 70 million. That's more than the population of the UK today. Hitler had a knack for speeches, but instead of using his skills to run a TED Talk, he decided to brainwash an entire nation. If he'd channeled the energy into a stand-up comedy or motivational speaking, the world would have been a much better place. But no, we went the other way. And his end? After realizing he was losing the war, Hitler decided to check out early by committing suicide in his bunker. A cowardly end to a man who caused so much death and destruction. So lesson learned, just because someone can give a good speech doesn't mean they should run a country, especially if they have weird facial hair. Joseph Stalin. Speaking of bad mustaches, let's talk about Joseph Stalin, the Soviet dictator who took paranoia to an Olympic level. Stalin didn't trust anyone. He saw enemies everywhere, even in his own shadow. And what do you do when you're that paranoid? You start purging, and not the spring cleaning kind. Stalin was the master of disappearances. If he didn't like you or thought you might be a threat, you'd be sent to a gulag, Siberia's favorite winter getaway, executed, or just erased from history. And Stalin was thorough. He had people airbrushed out of photos like they never existed. Talk about a control freak. Under Stalin's rule, millions of people died from forced labor, famines, most infamously, the Holodomor in Ukraine, and purges. The exact number is hard to pin down, but estimates range from 20 to 60 million. Stalin once said, "Death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem." Yeah, real nice guy. In a bizarre twist, Stalin's paranoia grew to the point where he trusted no one, not even his own doctors. Ironically, when he had a stroke, the doctors were too afraid to treat him, so he died. Slowly. Karma much? Mao Zedong. From Russia, we hop over to China, where Mao Zedong decided that his country needed a cultural revolution, a great leap forward that ended up leaping into a pit of despair. Mao was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and while he had big ideas, his methods were catastrophic. His great leap forward, intended to modernize China's economy, led to one of the deadliest famines in history, killing an estimated 15 to 45 million people. And then there was the Cultural Revolution, where Mao basically said, "Let's destroy everything old and start over." Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. Mao wasn't just a poor planner. He was indifferent to the suffering he caused. Famines, mass executions, forced labor, Mao shrugged it all off like it was just another Tuesday. He once said, "A revolution is not a dinner party," which is just about the understatement of the century. But hey, at least Mao's face is still on Chinese money, so there's that. It's like history's ultimate oops, my bad. Mao's portrait also looms large over Tiananmen Square in Beijing, where tourists and locals alike pass by daily, possibly wondering how someone so short could cast such a long shadow over history. Pol Pot. Last but not least, let's meet Pol Pot, the Cambodian leader who took the idea of back to basics a bit too seriously. In fact, he wanted to take Cambodia back to the Stone Age. Spoiler alert, it didn't work out. Pol Pot led the Khmer Rouge, a communist group that decided the best way to improve Cambodia was to eliminate anything resembling modern society. That meant no schools, no hospitals, no markets. Basically, if you had more than a loincloth and a shovel, you were too fancy for Pol Pot's liking. He evacuated entire cities, forcing people into the countryside to work as farmers. Sounds quaint, right? Well, not when you're doing it at gunpoint, with no food or medical care. Pol Pot's regime led to the deaths of about 2 million people, around a quarter of Cambodia's population at the time. Imagine a quarter of your country just gone. Not so quaint now, huh? Pol Pot's idea of making everyone equal was just to kill off anyone he thought was too smart, too wealthy, or too different. Wearing glasses? Death sentence. Speaking a foreign language? Bye-bye. Basically, Pol Pot would have been really bad at a TED Talk. In the end, Pol Pot was overthrown, but not before leaving a legacy of horror that Cambodia is still recovering from. On the bright side, he never got a chance to start a minimalist lifestyle blog. One thing's for sure, his idea of equality was as skewed as his moral compass. Conclusion. So there you have it, the 6 deadliest dudes in history, wrapped up in a somewhat lighter package. But let's be real, while we've had a bit of fun, the devastation these men caused is no laughing matter. They shaped history, but in ways that we wish they hadn't. History teaches us that power in the wrong hands can lead to an unimaginable suffering. These men were all leaders who had the chance to make the world a better place, but chose to leave it worse off instead. They remind us that while one person can indeed make a huge impact, that impact isn't always a good one. So what have we learned today? Perhaps that growing a weird mustache or becoming obsessed with spikes and farming techniques are not good ideas if you want to be remembered kindly by history? And maybe, just maybe, that absolute power really does corrupt absolutely. Remember folks, if you ever get the urge to take over the world or force everyone back to the countryside, take a deep breath and consider taking up a hobby instead, like knitting or stamp collecting. The world will thank you.